Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Number 4 team in the country, the Kentucky Wildcats, undefeated, first-year head coach Mark Pope, 7-0 for the first time since the 2016-2017 season. The issue or the conversation stems, though, from the fact that on Tuesday night, they did play their first road game of the season. They go to Clemson. They're a small 1.5-point favorite. What made you think that Vegas wants you to take Kentucky, but Clemson might be the right play? Well, it turns out Clemson was. Final score 70-66. The Kentucky Wildcats take the first loss of the Mark Pope era. So let's go ahead and dive into this. And before we get into kind of the Kentucky side of things, let's just go ahead and give credit to Clemson. Listen, I think this is probably the first time outside of last year's Sweet 16 and Elite 8 that we've talked Clemson basketball at all on this podcast. But you got to give credit where it's due. Early on in the game, Kentucky kind of had a couple big body blows early, but Clemson weathered the storm. And let's call a spade a spade. They were a better team down the stretch, second half, made the plays that they needed to win. I think what stood out, Kentucky, experienced, veteran, tough team. Clemson matched their toughness. Kentucky, a very good rebounding team. Clemson matched them in the rebounding department. Clemson took care of the basketball, only 8 total turnovers. This was the interesting part to me from the Clemson side of things. When we previewed this show on Monday, we talked about the fact that Clemson came into this game ranked 192nd in three-point field goal percentage defense. Well, they did a pretty good job. I think they're giving up about 34% coming in. They hold Kentucky to 7 of 27 from 3. That's 26% for the Wildcats. Meanwhile, Kentucky came in as a top 10 3-point defense. Clemson shoots 8 of 25. That's only 32%. So it's not to say that Clemson had some historic shooting night, but it doesn't change the fact that, in my opinion, Clemson made more big shots. Kentucky didn't. Listen, I'll say this, is that sometimes the shots just don't fall. I tweeted this out, but in the final minute of the game, Kentucky needed a shot. Otega Owe, who was their leading scorer, missed back-to-back three-pointers that were relatively wide open. Then Kentucky gets the ball out of bounds. Mark Pope draws up a perfect out-of-bounds play with a cross-court pass to a wide-open Otega Owe. He missed it. I'm by no means blaming the kid. I'm just saying that sometimes the shots just don't fall. Some of these are the same looks that you got in previous games, and they just didn't fall. So Clemson gets the win, but I do want to talk about the Kentucky perspective and really what we learned or are going to learn about Kentucky because of the fact that this is kind of an important stretch on Kentucky's schedule, okay? Bottom line is that, listen, we've all been impressed by the Mark Pope thing, but this was the first of what basically becomes a very tough stretch on the schedule. 3 of their next 4, this is after Tuesday night, are against power conference teams. So they play Gonzaga in Seattle on Saturday night. Then they have a random game somewhere along the way, but 3 of their next 4 are Gonzaga in Seattle, Louisville at home, Ohio State on a neutral. Now, Louisville's banged up right now, Ohio State's whatever, but it doesn't change the fact that the schedule is going to get tougher, and I do think that we learned a couple things about this team and a couple things that I think will be applicable going forward. Good news is this isn't college football. One loss doesn't mean anything. You get right, you figure it out, whatever. First off, let me say this. This is not a criticism of the totality of the Mark Pope year. I've said it consistently. I think he has done just about everything right since he's taken the job, said the right things, done the right interviews, met with the right people, great in the portal, great in high school recruiting. I just didn't think it was his best night overall, as a head coach. Not saying he's bad, not saying he's terrible, not saying fire him, not saying I don't believe in him, but just didn't feel like, it just felt like a little bit of an inconsistent performance. First of all, I've seen him say this. Lamont Butler got 2 early fouls and basically sat the rest of the first half. And I saw Mark Pope say somewhere, one of these, it must have been at the press conference, he basically said, I should have brought back Lamont Butler sooner. So Lamont doesn't really play. And we're going to get more to Lamont in a second. Kobe Brea, who Mark Pope has called, quote, the most efficient player in college basketball. plays 17 minutes, only takes 3 total attempts, 2 total 3-point attempts. This is a guy that came in as statistically the best 3-point shooter in college basketball. Doesn't mean that Mark Pope's terrible. Does mean that if he had to do it over again, I think you figure out a way to get Kobe Brea more opportunities, more shots, more this, more that. The other thing that I noticed outside of just, wasn't the best night for Pope doesn't mean he's terrible. I think we're starting to realize, and this is a lot of teams, by the way, early on in the season, you play a lot of guys, you figure out who's got it, you figure out who doesn't. I do think from the Kentucky side of things, I don't think this team is maybe as deep as I thought, because I think that was one of the selling points coming out of kind of the portal cycle and summer and this and that is, it's a team that could play 11, 12 guys. Well, you look at the game on Tuesday night, they only played 8. As I said, Kobe Brea barely played. And what I noticed was some of these guys, maybe we have to adjust expectations and adjust roles. Kirk Kriisa, I saw taking a lot of heat. Listen, I've obviously followed this kid's career since Arizona. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but you go back to the Arizona days when you played equal or more talented teams that were as physical, as aggressive, as athletic. Kirk Kriisa struggled. His last game at Arizona, go back and look at the box score. They lost to Princeton in round 1 of the NCAA tournament. He had like 2 points and 3 turnovers. Like he did nothing, okay? And so I think he's a very serviceable backup. But when Lamont Butler gets in foul trouble and Kirk Kriisa has to play 21 minutes, it's not going to be very good. And I think we saw that result on Tuesday night. Kirk Kriisa, by the way, finishes 21 points, 0 of 4 from the field, 0 of 4 from 3, 0 total points, 2 rebounds, 0 assists. The good news is no turnovers. Brandon Garrison, former McDonald's All-American. I was a guy that kind of gave him credit during the portal season. Oh, he'll be a great backup. He'll be a great 7th man. He'll turn into a starter. He's very much a work in progress. Doesn't mean he can't be good. Just means he's probably not quite there yet. You go back to this game. You look at his game overall, 12 minutes off the bench. He's 6'11", 7 feet. You're hoping to get a good performance out of him. He finishes with 2 points, 2 rebounds, 2 turnovers, 2 personal fouls. So 2 rebounds, 0 blocks for a guy that's 7 feet tall and 2 total points. Again, not saying that he is the worst possible player that has ever, walked the face of the earth. I'm just saying that, did not get the job done and probably isn't going to be the player that I think a lot of us thought he could be. Finally, let me say this. I think to me, the biggest takeaway from the Kentucky game on Tuesday night, Lamont Butler is by far the most important player on this team. I mentioned it. He only played 19 minutes. He got 2 early fouls. And you look at the on the court versus off the court results when he played. Saw a stat that he was plus 19 in terms of, the statistics of on the court versus off the court. Kentucky was minus 21 without him. Producer Matt, also pop up the tweet that I sent you earlier in the day. I saw this is from Tyler Bentley, I think a Kentucky fan. Despite only playing 19 minutes and his team losing the game, Lamont Butler was the MVP of the game last night, according to KenPom. Thank you, producer Matt. And I think that just speaks to who this team is and how valuable he is. Finishes the game. And again, he only played 19 minutes. And remember, on top of only playing 19 minutes, he twisted his ankle pretty bad in the second half and was basically playing on one leg, in the second half as well. And so I just bring it up because if you're plus 19, playing on one leg, only play 19 minutes, and you still, how about this? Finished with 16 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal. So you extrapolate that out. The per 40 on that is pretty good. 32 points, 10 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals. That's a pretty good night in a per 40. And I think what we see is how valuable he is and why you simply need him on the court more. And what it also says to me is everything that I have said from the beginning about this kid. Is I remember when he committed, he's a good defensive player and he'll come off the bench. And no. The reason that we view him as a good defensive player, he's a great defensive player. He was the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year a season ago at San Diego State. But I think what Kentucky fans are learning is what I kind of told you. There is way more to his offensive game. The issue has been at San Diego State, he just wasn't asked to do this. San Diego State plays one of the slowest tempos. They're a defensive-minded program. That's not a criticism. They obviously have had a ton of success. Sweet 16 last year, Final Four national championship game the year before. But he's just never been asked to do what he did. And so to me, I think it shows how important he is and how valuable it is to keep him on the court. By the way, you want to know how valuable he is in Mark Pope's eyes? Remember, when he entered the portal, what happened? He entered the portal on like a Wednesday night. By Friday morning, the entire Kentucky staff was flying to Las Vegas to see him work out. Mark Pope coached against him. Mark Pope knew how valuable he was. Mark Pope told him day one, you're my starting point guard. And I think we see the value there. So bottom line is you got to figure out a way to get him on the court more. And, you know, he's obviously got to stay out of foul trouble, but I think we see the value of who he is and what he brings to this team. Good news is Kentucky has plenty of chances to get right. As I mentioned, they play Gonzaga in Seattle on Saturday. That's going to be a great game. We'll probably preview that game on tomorrow's show. And then also shortly thereafter, a week after that, you got Louisville at home. You got Ohio State at Madison Square Garden. So the schedule doesn't get any easier, but the counter to that is you have a chance to pick up a couple good wins. And I'll tell you this, couple neutral court games, one home game. I like Kentucky to be just fine going forward. I don't think there's some like huge negative thing to say about Kentucky out of this game. Sometimes you just go on the road and you lose, and you gotta